Hi there, it's Vicki McCarthy from Aussie Stampers. Thank you very much for joining me again today. Today's project is called Wonderful Wreath Meets Embossed Hardwood. Now the interesting part about this project is that it looks very realistic. It almost looks as though it's actually made from wood because I've embossed the hardwood stamp set. I'm using one of these business size envelopes that I got from Officeworks because it matches our crumb cake paper and I needed a long shaped card with a long envelope. So here are the pieces that you're going to use. I'm using the Wondrous Wreath stamp set, and you can see there's a nib that sits on the bottom, and I've lined that up on the bottom of my stamp so that each time I stamp I'll know where to line up the wreaths, and that's a really useful tip for you if you're using this for the first time. Now you're using all of the wreath parts, and you're going to be using the bow and the wreath holder, which is that long strip. Now any greens that you have would work with this. I'm using a lighter green to begin with and then a darker green for the other leaves. But if you didn't have a light green, you could actually stamp this colour off a couple of times if you wanted to make it lighter. But I'm using a light green ink. Using my Stamp and Pierce mat and letting it sit for a minute before I lift it off. Now here's the darker green leaves, so I'm bringing in a darker colour for that. Lining it up. And if you take a little time with lining it up, you'll find you get a really good result. Now I'm going to bring in the holly berries. So any red you have would work with this. I'm using cherry cobbler, but real red would also work if you had real red. Press and hold and then lift it off and see how pretty that is. Isn't it gorgeous? Really pretty the way that all lines up. Now I'm going to bring in the bow, stamp that in the cherry cobbler, and then I'm going to bring in that long piece which is the wreath holder and stamp that as well. Now I'm going to pop this through the big shot on the magnetic platform, and you can see how that lines up at the bottom there. Just take a little time to line it up and you'll get a really good result. Then the middle piece lines up as well. Now sometimes you'll find when you're using the magnetic platform that if you have a small piece like this, it might bounce around a little bit. So in order to keep it in place, I just tore off a little bit of post-it note and popped that over the top, secured it down and then ran it through, and that was fine. So once you've cut these out, you can start looking at the size panels you're going to need for your card. You're going to need some more crumb cake, and I'll give you those panel dimensions for the panels that go on the door. So you're going to cut a 9 centimetre square and an 8.5 centimetre square. Then you're going to cut 2 pieces at 4 centimetres by 9 centimetres, and then 2 more pieces at 3.5 centimetres by 8.5 centimetres. Now it's the smaller layers that you're going to do the stamping on. So you're going to take your 8.5 centimetre square, and once you've inked up the hardwood stamp set, you can run the card base through it. Now your card base is 10.5 centimetres by 21.5 centimetres, so you're not really going to notice this line too much. You'll see there's a line when I take this off, but that's okay, and it will dry a slightly lighter colour anyway and cover it up with the panel. So the next panels are the smaller panels and pieces, so you're going to have your 8.5 centimetre square next. Then the smaller layer pieces, again, these are the 3.5 by 8.5 centimetre pieces. And now you can sponge all around the pieces that you've stamped. The other pieces, you don't need any stamping or sponging on those other layers, which just stay plain crumb cake. But the pieces that you stamped, you're going to sponge around as well. And this just helps the door look very three-dimensional. I'm using early espresso ink, but any dark brown ink would work here as well. Now it's time to do the embossing with the embossing folder, and this is where the magic happens. So line it up. I could only really fit one square in at a time. So I embossed that first. You can see how cool this looks. It looks almost like real timber, because not only do you have the beautiful hardwood stamp set, but you've embossed it as well with a wood grain finish, so it really looks like you've used wood. It's a really cool card. Now for the door panel itself, I wanted to emboss this as well. And it's a long piece of card, so you're going to emboss it in 2 stages. Emboss one half, run that through the big shot on no tabs on your multi-purpose platform. We're going to emboss it to about there, run it through to about there. And then I'm going to take it out and turn it around. You can see only half's embossed. So you can pop the other side back in and emboss the other half, run it to about that section. About there. Now this doesn't have to be exact because it's very forgiving, and it's also a piece that's going to have layers over the top. So as long as you get the embossing to run all the way down, you want it to line up reasonably well, but it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. Now this is how the layers go on. And you can see how those plain crumb cake pieces underneath give it more dimension again. So I'm just going to bring in some snail adhesive and adhere those using snail. And pop those on. Now I have sped up this video quite a bit because I didn't really want it to go any more than 10 minutes. I think it's rather difficult to sit and watch a really long tutorial. This is going to give you the general idea, and you can always pause it if you go back and make this project at any point where you want to take note of a little bit of extra instruction from me. And I'm just adhering those down now. You can see how it looks like a real door, doesn't it? Now to make it even look more realistic, I'm going to put a handle on it. I'm just piercing a hole and inserting one of the antique brads, opening the pins at the back. How cool is this? Now it's time to get the wreath put on the top. And you want to adhere this slightly below centre on that top panel because you need room for the bow at the top and the wreath hanger to fit on. Now this is a neat little trick for using on your card as well. I'm just going to snail the back of that wreath hanger to the door, make it nice and centred. And then to give it more dimension, I'm going to bring in a bone folder and just give it a bit of a curve. You can see I've curved that around so it looks like it's curving down over the door. And at this point I'm using a glue dot so that you can't see this through the project, whereas a dimensional wouldn't really work there because you'd be able to see it. And I'm just cutting a strip for the bow. And then I'm going to use the same technique with the bow. I'm going to bring in the bone folder and curve the bow as well so that it looks as though it's sitting up from the card. Just give it a nice curve. And it really does make it look dimensional again. Peel that off, pop it on. Okay, so now it's time to adhere that to your card base, which is exactly the same size as the first panel. And I used a 12 by 12 sheet of crumb cake in order to get a base that was big enough to fit one of these standard envelopes, because the regular A4 size paper wasn't quite big enough. And the final touch is just some crystal effects on the berries. And we are done. There's your project finished. So I hope you enjoyed that project today. I look forward to hearing from you soon. And remember, you can buy all of these products at aussiestampers.stampinup.net. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.